The purpose of this presentation is to analyse a clip from the film Solaris. The purpose of the clip is that it's a dramatic clip, and its purpose is to really introduce the main character, whose name is Chris Kelvin. Now, throughout the clip, Chris is shown to be really isolated and disconnected from the rest of the world, and that's exaggerated through a number of techniques. My goal here is to show you how different techniques really give this message of how isolated and disconnected Chris is from the rest of the world. The first technique I'm going to look at is camera, and for my first example, we're going to have a look at this clip here, or this scene here. This is a mid shot, and that's really reinforced by the fact that it starts kind of about his waist and goes up over his head. Now in this case he's not facing us, but it's still a mid shot. But the main thing that really shows the isolation and disconnection is the fact that the people he's talking to, or that are talking to him, are out of focus. And there's maybe a meaning in this that he's not focusing on them. You know, he's thinking more about himself, but for us as the viewer, we're also more focused on him and more interested on him than we are on anyone else. And that maybe shows that he's disconnected from these other people, almost like there's this barrier of focus that keeps him disconnected from the people around him. But I don't just want to give you one example of this. I want to show you my broader understanding of camera. So I'm also going to show you this scene here. Now, in contrast to the other scene, this is actually a wide shot, and the reason for that is because Chris is kind of hidden in the scene, but he's not the main subject or focus. It really tells us more about the environment. Some of the factors to keep in mind here are the fact that Chris is the only person in the light. The rest of the apartment looks like it's quite dark, and there's no signs of anyone else living there. And then there's some other pieces of evidence, like all of these books and things that are on the table kind of illustrate to us that, you know, obviously he's not preparing dinner for to have dinner with someone. There's no other signs of life, and that further exaggerates that feeling of isolation. So really what we're saying is that the camera reveals Kelvin to be disconnected from people, and that's reinforced by these examples. It also shows that he's lonely and isolated at home. So hopefully this evidence really is relevant to that and demonstrates what we understand. The second technique we're going to look at is lighting. The first scene I want to look at is this clip here, which really shows Chris as quite separate to the outside world. In this case, you can see he's a silhouette. He's all black, and the frames and the inside of his office, everything is dark and gloomy, whereas outside the window we can see that the world is actually bright and colourful. And again, it kind of reinforces that there's a bit of a difference or a distance between him and the real world. To show you more evidence and to further demonstrate my understanding of lighting, I want to show you this, which is a bit more of a subtle scene, but in this case you can see that the main light source is kind of over here, like the brightest parts, and we can see a little bit of light maybe coming from the window over on Chris's arm here. But the expression we see of him is actually that his face is quite heavily clad in darkness. You can actually see that there's a shadow here on his face, and it really kind of envelops his mood. He's not smiling, we're not seeing bright sunshine on his face, and this maybe suggests that he's not happy, or that, you know, something's happened to him that's negative. So what we've really shown is that the lighting in this case shows Kelvin to be disconnected from the rest of the world through the first example, and it also gave a negative connotation to his personality. He's clearly not happy, so we don't get a positive vibe from this clip, which further supports really its purpose. The third thing I want to look at is sound, and I'm going to play you a couple of sections of this so you can see.
Linda, this is Chris Kelvin. I'm returning your call. I have 2 times available this week, 7 a.m. on Tuesday or 6:15 p.m. on Thursday. You can leave a message if either of those times are good for you. Thank you.
So in this clip you would have noticed that he makes these bookings at the times, and he offers 6 a.m, so really early in the morning when most people might be at home, or he offers 9 p.m. So that maybe suggests that he might be a bit of a workaholic, or his work might be consuming his life. And it's a really subtle hint through dialogue, the fact that perhaps he's obsessed with his work and doesn't have much connection outside of his work. So that further reinforces that disconnection. Let's have a bit of a look at the second clip and just take this further. So So in this clip, it's really about diegetic sound, but what it's saying is it's taking the atmospheric sound from the clip and just using it to show how maybe, because it's quite loud and all-consuming, it could be maybe just how he's getting lost in the sounds of the world, and there's no music or anything there to really emphasize how he's feeling. It just all feels a bit dark and dull and disconnected, and that further reinforces what we're saying this clip is all about. So what the sound really proves is that, again, we see that he's obsessed with his work, which might further suggest that he's disconnected or isolated from society, and also shows a real lack of joy and substance in his life. Bringing all of this together, what have I achieved? Well, I've shown you this clip and I've told you that the aim is to set a tone of isolation and depression, and that's really shown through the character of Kelvin. All of my evidence points towards that. The aim of the clip and this idea of isolation and depression was supported by the techniques I've shown you around camera, lighting and the sound of the piece. So hopefully you get a good understanding of exactly how this was communicated.